The first thing my dad did that night was call me useless while handing me the responsibility he did not want to deal with. He said it casually, like someone flicking lint off a shirt. Useless, like you can finally be helpful. Those words landed softer than I expected. Not because they were gentle, but because I had heard versions of them my entire life. His voice carried the same low judgment it always did, but something in the way he said it felt final. Like he had already decided I did not belong anywhere near the rest of the family. Mia stood behind him at the front door, zipping her bright suitcase with the kind of excitement that made her look 12 instead of 30. She rolled her eyes at me without even trying to hide it. She was glowing from the warm lights on the porch and the thrill of the New Year's Eve trip they had been planning for weeks. I was not invited. I was never invited. I was assigned. My mom hovered near the garage door with her coat half on, tugging the collar up like she could hide inside it. She kept her eyes on the asphalt instead of looking at me. It was something she had perfected over the years, the art of pretending I was just out of frame. The cold air from outside drifted in as they moved around, the smell of their winter cologne and perfume mixing with the sharp scent of the December night. My dad pulled on his gloves and checked his phone. Mia brushed past me to grab her charger from the counter, bumping my shoulder without apologizing. Then he pointed at the hallway. "Make sure she is okay. Do not call unless she stops breathing." He said it like he was giving instructions to a hired sitter. Then he added quietly, almost as an afterthought, "We will be back tomorrow night if the roads are not too icy." I remember the sound of their boots on the porch, the car doors slamming, the engine starting. It echoed through the house like a decision being sealed. I stood still, listening until the car finally rolled down the driveway. When the headlights disappeared past the mailbox, the silence that settled over the house felt like a blanket being thrown over. Something dangerous. Before I go any further, let me pause just for a moment. I always wonder what people are doing when they listen to stories like this. It makes everything feel a little more human. If you want to share later, I would actually like to know. When all of this happened, I was standing in that narrow hallway with my hands cold from the draft and my heart trying to convince me it had not been bruised again by the same people who had bruised it for years. The house felt too quiet as I walked toward Grandma's room. The carpet was worn from years of footsteps that never seemed to include mine. I pushed open the door slowly, expecting to see the same stillness I had seen for months. The light from the hallway spilled across her bed, and for a second I hesitated at the threshold. Something in the air felt wrong, or right. I could not tell. Gran lay exactly where she had been earlier that day, her hair silver and soft against the pillow, her hands resting on the blanket like delicate things. Her eyes were closed and her breathing was slow but steady. I stepped closer, unsure why the feeling in my stomach was twisting. I had always wondered if she ever truly heard anything around her during the months she had been in this state. She had been unresponsive during doctor visits and family gatherings, never opening her eyes, never speaking. I stood beside her bed and reached for the blanket to straighten it. The room smelled faintly of lavender from the diffuser Mia had bought last month, claiming it was supposed to help with calming the mind. I placed my hand near Grandma's wrist and whispered that I would be here through the night. My voice sounded small in the quiet room. I almost convinced myself that this would be like every other time I had checked on her. But then her fingers moved. At first it was barely a twitch. I froze, staring at her hand. Then her eyelids fluttered like someone fighting their way out of a long dream. I took a step back, my breath catching in my throat. Grand opened her eyes fully and looked straight at me. There was awareness in her gaze, recognition, fear, and something like relief. Before I could say anything, her hand reached out and wrapped around my wrist with surprising strength. She pulled me close, her voice raspy but intentional. "They think you do not matter." My knees nearly gave out. I sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at her. My mind scrambled for logic, for the doctors, for the scans, for the endless, quiet months, for all the moments she had been completely still. It did not make sense. It made terrible, perfect sense. Gran squeezed my wrist again and held my stare like she had been waiting for someone to finally meet her eyes. Her breathing was shallow but steady. She blinked slowly, urging me to stay calm. I whispered her name, barely audible, afraid the moment would shatter if I spoke too loudly. She slowly nodded, confirming she was fully aware, fully awake, and had been this way for longer than I could guess. A sudden noise broke through the moment. A click from the back door. My chest tightened. For a second, I thought my dad had returned. I shot up from the bed, heart pounding, and moved toward the hallway to listen. My hands were shaking as I held my breath. The house creaked again, the sound of old wood shifting in the cold, and nothing else. I exhaled slowly. It was nothing. Just the house settling. When I turned back toward Grandma, she was still watching me with sharp attention, her lips parted slightly like she wanted to speak again. I stepped closer. My voice trembled when I asked if she had been awake all this time. She blinked once. Yes. The truth in her eyes was terrifying. I reached for the bedside lamp and lowered the light, creating a softer glow. The shadow of fear on her face eased just a little. She looked exhausted, but the awareness in her gaze remained piercing. As I sat down again, she lifted her fingers in a small gesture, asking me to lean in. I bent forward and she whispered, barely a breath, "Do not trust them. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not ever again." I felt something inside me split open. The words landed with the weight of every doubt I had swallowed over the years. The night was quiet, but the house felt alive with things I did not yet understand. I could feel the truth pressing against the walls, waiting to break out. Gran let her hand fall back onto the blanket and closed her eyes for a moment. Gathering strength, I stayed beside her, trying to piece together what had just happened. My dad's voice echoed in my memory. That final sting he threw at me like a gift. Useless. Helpful only when they needed someone to absorb the blame. Someone to hide behind. For the first time in my life, I wondered if this night was not just another rejection. Maybe it was the beginning of the unraveling. Maybe it was the one moment they would wish they had not pushed me aside. I looked at Grandma again, watching her chest rise and fall. Her breathing was steady. Her presence felt different now, stronger, almost urgent. She had opened her eyes for a reason. She had spoken for a reason. And I knew the answers would not be gentle. I stood up to check the hallway again, making sure the doors were locked, making sure nobody had come back unexpectedly. The world outside was dark and quiet, the snow falling softly across the streetlights. The kind of night where secrets could spread like smoke without anyone noticing. When I walked back into her room, Grandma opened her eyes once more and held my gaze with frightening clarity. She lifted her hand just slightly, her fingers trembling, and whispered the words that would change everything about the life I thought I understood. Stay awake tonight. I sat down beside her, the weight of the warning settling heavy in my chest. No, this was only the beginning. And knowing nothing in that house was what it seemed. I stayed beside her after she whispered those words. Afraid to move, afraid that any shift in the room might disturb whatever fragile truth had just surfaced. Stay awake tonight. The warning echoed in my head as she closed her eyes again, but I could tell she was not drifting away. She was listening, thinking, measuring the weight of what came next. I sat there, feeling the cold from the hallway creeping into the warmth of her room, and finally found the courage to whisper the question that had been clawing at my throat. How long have you been awake? Her eyelids lifted just enough for me to see, recognition flicker across them. Long enough, she murmured. The words were soft but steady, spoken like someone who had been waiting for months to finally be heard. I felt my pulse banging against my ribs as she opened her eyes wider and let her breath settle. She was not weak. She was not confused. She was choosing each moment with purpose. You have been pretending. The words slipped out before I could stop myself. Grandma nodded slowly. I have had to. Your dad watches everything. He always has. Her voice cracked a little but regained strength quickly. I leaned closer, instinctively glancing at the baby monitor camera Mia had installed months ago. It had always faced the foot of the bed. Grandma followed my gaze, unplugged 48 hours ago. She lifted her hand a bit. I did it myself. That small movement was more shocking than anything else so far. Her control, her clarity, her resolve. She was not recovering. She was resisting. I asked her why, my voice catching on the last word. She swallowed, took a breath, and said words that felt like a weight falling through my chest. Your dad wanted to control the narrative. He told doctors things that were not true, told them I was declining faster than I was. He needed them to believe I was not aware enough to answer my own questions. Doctors. Months. My heart felt like it was stalling. I remembered the specialist appointments where Grandma never responded. He always stepped into the conversation, sounding authoritative, explaining her symptoms, her progression, her memory loss. The doctors believed him because he spoke firmly and confidently, and because he carried the insurance papers in a neat folder that he guarded like a second wallet. But she had been awake. How did you hide it? My voice trembled. She blinked slowly. Practice. And your dad never paid attention to what he did not expect to see. I stared at her, feeling a mix of horror and disbelief. I reached out to touch her hand again and felt her squeeze lightly, reassuring me. Her skin was warm. Her gaze was sharp. She had been playing a role inside her own home to survive something I still could not fully understand. Then she glanced toward the nightstand. My phone buzzed there, a faint vibration. I picked it up, but there were no notifications. She lifted her chin slightly. I texted someone when you stepped out to get water earlier. Her voice dropped. My lawyer. I froze. He is coming. Her expression did not change. He has been waiting for a moment when your dad was not home. Tonight is the first night in weeks that the house is unguarded. I looked toward the hallway again, half expecting the sound of an engine returning, the front door opening, Dad calling my name in the same clipped tone he always used. But the house stayed silent. Why me? Why wait until I was here? Grandma inhaled slowly. Because your presence changes everything. They think you are harmless. They think you will not question anything. They think you are easy to manipulate. That last line hit me harder than the cold air creeping under the door. I felt something tightening in my throat. Something between anger and grief. Gran saw it. She reached for my hand again and whispered, "You are not them." That is why I waited. There was a sudden, soft knock at the back door. Not loud, not impatient, just 2 taps, spaced apart. I was startled, but Grandma nodded, eyes steady. That is him. I moved through the hallway quietly, making sure the floorboards did not creak. The night felt colder in the kitchen, like the house had been holding its breath for too long. I unlocked the back door and opened it just enough to see a man in a heavy coat, scarf pulled up, glasses fogged from the temperature change. He lifted his hand gently to show he meant no harm. Anna, I am Mr. Collins. I have been working with your grandmother for several months. His voice was low, confident, and carried a tone that instantly eased some of the panic coiled inside me. I let him in quickly and locked the door. He brushed snow from his shoulders and followed me down the hallway toward Grandma's room. When he stepped inside and saw her eyes open, his expression softened with something like respect. He lowered himself into the chair beside her bed and spoke to her with the familiarity of someone who had been part of a long, quiet plan. You did well reaching out, Margaret. Now we can begin. The words made my chest tighten again. Begin what? I sank slowly into the armchair across the room as he pulled a thick envelope from his satchel, and handed it to me. Before you look inside, he said, let me explain why I am here tonight. I nodded, gripping the envelope with both hands, the paper stiff and cold from outside air. Your grandmother contacted me months ago, he said, because she noticed changes in her financial accounts. Unauthorized transfers, attempts to redirect her monthly income, renewals for services she never requested. He kept his voice calm, even, factual. She suspected someone was accessing her accounts without her knowledge. Dad. I did not say it out loud, but the name felt like a stone forming in my throat. Mr. Collins continued. She also noticed that certain medications were being picked up earlier than scheduled. When she confronted the pharmacist, she learned that someone had been signing for them on her behalf. My stomach dropped. I looked at Grandma. Her eyes were steady, watching me. That triggered a pharmacy report, he said. Mandatory by law. When controlled substances do not match expected usage, Someone is alerted. That someone was an investigator with the State Agency for Elder Care. I gripped the envelope tighter. Why did no one else know? Your grandmother told them she needed more time before, an in-home visit. She did not want to raise suspicion inside this house. He glanced around the room. Everything she has done was to prevent escalation before she was ready. I opened the envelope. Inside were printed documents, paper that felt too heavy, too real. I scanned the first page, a power of attorney form with a signature that looked almost like Grandma's, but not quite. The curve of the G was wrong, too sharp, too deliberate. This is fake, I whispered it like someone afraid of waking a sleeping animal. Mr. Collins nodded. We compared it with previous documents she signed. That signature was forged, and it was filed electronically through an IP address registered to this house. I felt the room tilt slightly. Then I forced myself to breathe and turned to the next document. Hospice intake papers. They listed conditions Grandma did not have, claimed she was non-responsive for 6 months, claimed she required end-of-life care planning. My dad had said those words to doctors. He'd used them like they were facts. There are financial records, too, Mr. Collins added. Your dad attempted to transfer her retirement distributions into a joint account. The bank flagged it and put a temporary hold. That was 2 days ago. He may have received a notice about it today. Everything inside me began to rearrange itself. My childhood memories, my understanding of my family, the uneasy feeling that had lived inside me for years. It was all taking shape, revealing something darker than I had ever allowed myself to imagine. I lifted my eyes from the documents. Why am I here tonight? Why did they want me instead of someone else? Mr. Collins exchanged a look with Grandma. Because you are the perfect witness, he said. Not their ally, not their enemy. Just invisible enough that they believed you would not question anything. If anything happened to your grandmother tonight, you would be the last person to see her alive. That carries weight in a legal setting. My breath caught. They wanted me to be the one who told investigators she was declining naturally. And because I am family, they assumed I would defend them. Gran's voice cut through my shock. They underestimate you. They always have. I looked at her, at the strength in her gaze, the quiet fire that must have been burning for months inside a body forced to stay still. My throat felt tight. She had protected herself by pretending to be weaker than she was, and she had waited for me. Mr. Collins leaned forward. Anna, listen carefully. Your being here may have just saved her life. The sentence hung in the air, heavy and final, settling into the space between who I had been and who I was about to become. Your being here may have just saved her life. The words kept circling in my mind long after Mr. Collins said them. They settled into me like cold water poured slowly over the back of my neck, seeping into every place I had once tried to defend with excuses. I sat back in the chair, holding the envelope with both hands, uncertain whether to breathe or break. Grand watched me with an expression that was not pity and not fear. Something steadier. Something that felt almost like expectation. I asked her softly if she had known they would leave me here tonight. She nodded once. I waited for an explanation, but she let the silence stretch until the meaning became obvious. Of course she knew. My family had a pattern. They always made choices that benefited them first, and I happened to exist in the leftover space behind those choices. Mr. Collins reached for his notebook and clicked his pen. Before we go any further, I need to ask you something important, Anna. He waited until I met his eyes. Tell me everything your dad and your sister said before leaving the house tonight, exactly as you remember it. The directness of the request jolted me. I swallowed and began repeating the evening in order, starting with the way Dad tossed the car keys onto the counter while Mia complained about my being slow to answer the door. I described how Dad kept saying he was in a rush, how he sighed dramatically when I asked a simple question about the medications, how Mia smirked when she called me dramatically. Then I got to the part where Dad looked me directly in the eye, the porch light catching the corner of his face, and said the words that had been sitting like a bruise on my ribs ever since. Useless, like you can finally be helpful. Mr. Collins wrote quickly, his expression tightening. Grant closed her eyes briefly. almost like she was in pain. I felt my voice falter. I tried to keep it steady, but there was something about hearing those words out, loud, in front of two people who actually listened, that made them land differently. They sounded crueler, more deliberate, not like a passing comment, but like a truth he carried and felt comfortable enough to say. I waited for one of them to tell me I was exaggerating. I waited for someone to give him the benefit of the doubt, the way I always had, but neither of them did. Mr. Collins simply nodded and asked, "Did your dad say anything else about your grandmother's condition before leaving?" I described how he mentioned that she was not showing improvement, and how he insisted I should not call unless she stopped breathing. I told him how Mia said Grandma was not aware enough to know who was in the room. As I spoke, he took notes with the precision of someone who understood exactly how each detail fit into a much larger picture. When I finished, the room felt heavier. Grand opened her eyes again. Her voice was faint, but clear. "He wanted control over the story, Anna. He always did. And as long as I stayed quiet, he thought he had it." I stared at her, feeling something slowly unravel inside me. I thought of growing up in this house, hearing arguments through the walls, hearing Dad complain about everything he could not control. The mortgage, the market, his job, Mia's behavior, my existence. That last one had always felt like an exaggeration in my head, like a story I forced myself to believe, so the disappointment hurt less. But it had not been in my head. Grandma's eyes softened. "You were born during a bad time for them," she said. "They were fighting constantly. Money was tight. They blamed each other for every small thing. Then your mom found out she was pregnant again." She paused. I leaned closer without meaning to. "Your dad did not want another child," she said. "Not then. Not with everything falling apart. So he convinced himself that you were the reason things got worse. Even after they eventually stabilized, he kept that belief. It was easier than facing his own failings." I felt my stomach hollow out. A small sound escaped my throat before I could stop it. I pressed my hand against my mouth. The room grew quiet, except for the hum of the heater turning on. Grand continued, her voice gentle but unflinching. "They did not choose you, Anna. Not really. But that was not your failure. That was theirs." I closed my eyes as tears slid down my cheeks. I was not ashamed of crying. I was ashamed of how deeply those words sank into me, how familiar they felt. I never asked for confirmation before. I never thought I needed it. But hearing it now, spoken plainly by the only person in the house who had never treated me like a burden, felt like the final proof of something I had tried so desperately to bury. "You weren't abandoned," Grandma whispered. "You were finally released." My breath caught. It sounded poetic, almost comforting, but I knew what she meant. They had never been mine to keep, and I had never been theirs to treasure. "Mr. Collins gave me a moment before he spoke again. When you think you are ready, I will ask more questions. Only what is necessary to build a timeline for the investigator." I nodded, wiping my face. I did not feel ready, but I could feel strength forming in the same place where the pain was sitting. It felt unsteady, but real. Grandma looked toward the envelope still sitting open on my lap. "There is something else you need to understand," she said. "I did not fake being unconscious to deceive you. I did it to protect myself from your dad and to protect whatever I had left to pass to someone who would not use it to hurt others." Her words drew another realization forward, with slow, aching clarity. She had chosen me. Not because I was convenient or available, but because she trusted me in a way no one else in the family ever had. I asked her when she decided to take this route, to pretend she was declining. "Months ago," she said, "after I overheard your dad talking to Mia about residential care facilities. Not the good ones. The ones that drain accounts until there is nothing left. He kept mentioning my retirement funds. I knew what he was planning." My pulse quickened. She had been listening, watching, waiting, all while everyone else in the family assumed she was slipping away. "Mr. Collins added quietly, "She contacted me after that conversation and asked for a complete audit of her, medical and legal documents." It was clear something was wrong. Gran turned her gaze toward me again. I thought I could handle it alone, but then the pharmacy report was filed. I realized time was running out. and then you came home." The way she said it made something inside me shift. I suddenly remembered moments from my childhood that had never made sense. Adam praised Mia for the smallest achievements, but saying nothing whenever I did something well. Mia getting birthday parties, new outfits, sports camps. I got handed me-downs and reminders of how expensive life already was. The difference had been subtle at times and painfully obvious at others, but it had shaped everything about the way I grew up. I took a deep breath. Gran gestured gently for me to sit closer again. I did. "Anna," she said softly, "I never believed the things they said about you. Not once. You were not difficult. You were not unplanned in a way that made you lesser. You were simply unexpected, and they never made room in their hearts to understand that." My voice cracked as I whispered, "So it was never my fault." She shook her head slowly. "No. It was their limitation, not your failing." The truth settled into me with a mixture of grief and relief, like a knot finally loosening after years of tightening. I felt myself sit a little straighter. Mr. Collins asked one last question before gathering his papers. "Anna, now that you know all of this, do you want to continue helping us move forward? You are not obligated to be involved beyond what is necessary." I looked at Grandma. Her eyes held mine with quiet strength. She did not plead. She did not push. She simply waited, trusting me to answer for myself. I felt the answer come from a place deep inside. A place that had been bruised for years, but had never fully broken. I nodded. "I am not running from this." Grandma exhaled with a trembling relief, and Mr. Collins gave a small, approving nod before closing his notebook. For the first time that night, I felt something steady settle in my chest. A sense of purpose I had never known before. A clarity that came not from anger, but from finally understanding the truth. And it was only the beginning. "I am not running from this." The words were still warm on my tongue when the room seemed to settle into a new kind of silence. Not the fearful silence that had filled the house earlier, but a quiet that felt like something shifting inside me. Mr. Collins closed his notebook. Grandma adjusted her head slightly on the pillow, and for the first time that night, I felt the air move around us with purpose. Instead of dread, Grandma nodded toward the envelope again, urging me silently to keep looking. My hands were steadier this time as I pulled out the next set of documents. Medical care logs. They were printed in neat columns, with dates and times, and descriptions of symptoms I had never once witnessed. Increased confusion, agitation, unresponsiveness, declining verbal ability. I stared at them as a strange chill crawled up my spine. "These are lies," I whispered. Grandma blinked once, slowly. "Yes." Mr. Collins leaned closer. "These logs were submitted electronically to her primary care office. Your dad claimed he was keeping track of daily changes. He even attached photos." He paused, his voice flattening. "Photos taken without her consent." I felt my stomach twist. I remembered walking past her door so many nights, seeing Dad inside, adjusting her blanket, repositioning her pillows, taking her temperature even when she was asleep. I never questioned it. I assumed he was being attentive, responsible, a good son trying to care for his aging mother. Now I saw it clearly. He was building a narrative, not for her health, but for documentation. I reached for the next paper and found an email printed out from an account listed under my dad's full name. It was addressed to a hospice service. The message was brief. It stated that my grandmother had been unresponsive for 2 months and that the family was considering end-of-life support options. Grand was awake during this time, Mr. Collins said quietly, listening to everything. She informed me that the hospice call was the moment she decided she had to act. They were preparing to transition her without her consent. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, a tight pressure that made it hard to breathe. I looked at Grandma, imagining what it must have felt like to lie still, unable to react, forced to pretend, while hearing plans about her own death. Her face was calm now, but her eyes carried a history I could barely comprehend. "Why did they need me here?" I asked, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. "Why pick me?" Mr. Collins shifted slightly in his chair. "Because you are believable," he said. "You are family, and you have a reputation they are aware of. They see you as quiet, uncertain, not likely to cause conflict. If anything happened tonight, you would be the one to provide the final testimony of her decline, Grand added softly. They thought you would protect them, even at the cost of yourself. The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. For years, I had been the one who tried to keep peace, who stayed out of the way, who accepted whatever role they handed me. I had been trained to believe the best way to be loved was to be invisible. The realization sank into me slowly, like a stone settling at the bottom of a lake. I was not chosen because I mattered. I was chosen because I did not. I dropped my gaze to my hands. They were trembling in my lap. I squeezed them together, trying to steady myself. The reality of it all felt like a wave rising inside me, one that threatened to drown every old belief I had clung to. Before I could speak, Mr. Collins's phone vibrated in his coat pocket. He excused himself and stepped out into the hallway to answer it. Gran and I waited in the quiet. The distant hum of the heater and the soft ticking of her bedside clock were the only sounds. When he returned, his expression had changed. His voice was low but urgent. That was the investigator. There has been an escalation. The pharmacy filed a second report because the medication doses picked up yesterday do not match the records in the system. They want to come tonight, early, instead of next week. My heart stopped. Tonight. Grandma's reaction was immediate. Let them come. Her voice was steady in a way that made my own nerves feel almost childish. I looked at her, at the determination in her eyes, and I wondered how long she had been carrying this courage alone. She nodded to Mr. Collins, signaling her consent. He turned to me. Anna, this is important. When the investigator arrives, you need to understand that your presence here will be questioned. They will want to know why you were the only family member chosen to stay overnight. I swallowed hard. Because they used me. Because they expected me to lie without even realizing it. Mr. Collins nodded as if he could hear my thoughts. They expected you to confirm their story of her decline. He paused. But things have changed now. I looked toward the door as if expecting someone to walk in already. I felt a tightness in my chest, a mix of fear and awakening strength. The house suddenly looked different in my mind. Not the place I had grown up in, not the place where I had struggled to earn affection or approval, but a place where truths had been buried and manipulated until they formed a trap. Gran reached out for my hand again. Her skin was warm, her grip gentle but firm. They never saw you for who you are, she said. They saw a role. Something useful, not a person. Her voice trembled slightly on the last word. It was the first hint of vulnerability I had seen from her since she opened her eyes earlier. It reminded me that she was still human, still fragile, still at risk. She was not just a symbol of strength or resilience. She was my grandmother, and she was fighting for her life. Mr. Collins stepped toward the door. I need to call the investigator back and confirm your permission to enter. Legally, since you are a resident in the home and her direct caregiver tonight, your consent is enough. I nodded. My throat was too tight to speak. When he stepped away again, Grandma drew me closer with her eyes. Anna, listen to me. If anything happened to me tonight, they would have used your testimony to protect themselves. They counted on your silence. Her words settled deep. I felt something burst quietly inside me, like a knot that had been holding everything together, suddenly snapped. The pain of it was sharp, but behind it came something clearer, something stronger. I asked her the question I had been too afraid to ask earlier. If they wanted to control everything, why pretend I mattered at all? Gran sighed softly. Because it is easier to use someone than to care for them, and they believed you would never question the role they assigned you. She paused, her gaze piercing. They do not see you as a daughter. They see you as a tool. The truth hit with a force I was not prepared for. I felt the room shift. I gripped the blanket to steady myself. The years of being overlooked, dismissed, scolded, used as an errand runner, emotional buffer, and silent presence all rushed back in vivid waves. Memories of birthdays forgotten, holidays spent cleaning instead of celebrating, apologies I never received, and expectations I never met. The realization sank fully this time. In their story, I had never been a daughter. It was convenient. My breath shook as I exhaled, but there was no breaking this time. No collapse. Just clarity. I stood up, moved to the dresser, and opened the drawer where my dad kept stacks of printed medical notes he claimed were for organization. I sifted through the papers until I found what I was looking for. Care logs, daily summaries. He had printed several copies, probably to hand to doctors. I flipped through them, scanning the writing. He described symptoms she never had, episodes that never happened, entire weeks where he claimed she was incoherent. Each line felt like a new betrayal. I found an email draft in his printed folder, something he must have been preparing to send. It outlined a transition plan, with hospice scheduled for early January. My breath caught. He was planning to move her as soon as the holiday was over. I returned to the bedside, the papers trembling in my hand. Grandma watched me quietly, letting me process. My voice sounded different when I finally spoke. Lower, steadier. They were planning to erase you. Grand blinked, the faintest nod confirming the truth. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the weight of everything settle. When I looked at her again, I felt something inside me shift completely. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled me. It fueled something else, something urgent and fierce. I am staying, I said. No matter what happens next, I am not leaving you alone. Grandma's eyes softened. Grief spread across her features, so gentle it felt like a hand smoothing the surface of a troubled lake. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself to relax slightly against the pillows. Miss Collins returned to the doorway then, his expression composed, but tight with urgency. The investigator is on the way. He will arrive within 30 minutes. I nodded, feeling the reality of the situation settle around us like thick air. The house felt different again. Not haunted, not hopeless, just ready. Grand closed her eyes for a moment before opening them again, her gaze fixed on me with a quiet intensity that reached into the deepest parts of me, who I was. You were never weak, Anna, she said. You were never the mistake they made you believe you were. They failed you. Not the other way around. I swallowed hard, letting her words settle into the spaces left open by grief and awakening. I am not running from this anymore. The decision sat between us, solid and unmoving. And for the first time in my life, it felt like mine. I stood there for a long moment, feeling the echo of my own words lingering in the air. I am not running from this anymore. It was the first time in my life I had said something like that and actually meant it. Grandma watched me with a soft pride that almost hurt to look at. And Mr. Collins stepped into the hallway to wait for the investigator. The house felt tight around me, as if everything inside it already knew the truth was finally being dragged into the light. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were still trembling a little, but my mind felt strangely steady. There was one person I needed to call before anything else moved forward. One person who had stayed silent too long. Mom. For a few seconds, I just stared at her contact name. My thumb hovered over the call button, and I thought about all the years when calling her had meant comfort, or at least the hope of it. Tonight, it meant something different. Tonight, it meant finding out whether she had ever been on my side at all. I pressed the button. It rang twice before she answered. Her voice came through soft and tired. Hello? I swallowed. Mom, I need to ask you something. There was a tiny pause, barely noticeable unless you were listening for it. Anna, honey, it's late. What's going on? Your dad said everything was fine when you all left earlier. That sentence alone told me what I needed to know. She had already talked to him. He had already crafted whatever story he wanted her to believe. I tried to breathe evenly. Mom, I'm with Grandma. She's awake. Silence. Not a gasp, not a shocked breath, nothing. Just empty, suspended quiet, as if she were trying to decide in real time how she was supposed to react. Finally, she spoke. What do you mean, awake? I closed my eyes. Her voice wasn't alarmed. I wasn't relieved. It wasn't even confusing. It was guarded. Careful. Practiced, exactly the way she sounded every time she tried to avoid telling me the truth. She's awake, Mom. And she has been for a long time. She wasn't in a coma. She wasn't unresponsive. She was pretending because she was afraid of what Dad was planning. A soft exhale came through the line, a sound too controlled to be genuine shock. Anna, I don't understand what you're saying. She always did this. She always hid behind confusion whenever the truth got too close. My voice came out tighter than I expected. Did you know, Mom? Another silence. Longer, this time. I heard my own pulse in my ears. I could feel Grandma watching me with steady patience, giving me room to find the words she knew I needed to say. Mom, did you know what Dad was doing? There was a faint rustle on the other end, maybe the sound of her sitting down or turning away from someone nearby. The silence stretched out so long it felt unbearable. I had the sudden, heartbreaking thought that she might actually hang up, that she might choose running away instead of answering me. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Anna, I can't talk about this. I closed my eyes. The pain that hit me wasn't sharp. It wasn't dramatic. It was dull and deep, like bruises that had been forming for years, finally revealing themselves all at once. Mom, please, just tell me. I can't, she repeated, a little firmer this time. Your dad, this is complicated. He's under so much stress. You don't know everything. There it was. The line she had used my entire childhood. You don't know everything. As if not knowing were my fault. As if keeping me in the dark had been an act of love instead of control. I felt my throat burn. Grand reached out and placed her hand over mine, grounding me, steadying me. Her eyes told me not to run from this moment. Mom, I said, my voice low, did you know he forged documents? Did you know he tried to put her into hospice? Did you know he planned to use me as proof she was declining? A long breath. Anna, stop. Stop? That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet, irreversible break. Mom, she wasn't dying. She wasn't even declining. She heard everything. She saw everything. And you didn't protect her. You didn't protect me. Another sigh. The kind that wasn't sadness, but exhaustion. The kind people use when they want out of a conversation. Anna, I'm not doing this with you. You always make things harder than they need to be. My stomach dropped. That sentence. That one sentence was the story of my entire life. Every disappointment, every misunderstanding, every time she looked past me to keep the peace with Dad. It all fits into those words. You always make things harder. I could barely breathe. So that's it? You're not even going to ask if Grandma is safe? More silence. The kind that felt like a knife. Mom, I whispered, are you choosing Dad? A small sound came through, a breath caught in her throat. Then, quietly, carefully, she said the words that would change everything between us. I can't talk about this. A slow, hollow ache spread through my chest. I realized then that I had been holding on to a tiny piece of hope, a fragile thread that maybe, just maybe, my mother would choose me. That she would finally step out of his shadow. But she didn't. She never had. I opened my eyes and stared at the far wall, letting the truth settle like cold snow. I felt Grandma's hand tighten gently around mine. Encouraging, present, real. Mom, I said softly, I guess I really don't have parents. She inhaled sharply, maybe surprised, maybe hurt. But she didn't deny it. She didn't fight it. She didn't say my name the way mothers do when they suddenly realize they've gone too far. She said nothing. Absolutely nothing. For the first time, I understood silence not as lack of sound, but as a choice, a decision, a line drawn on purpose. When I finally spoke again, my voice was steady. I hope you find whatever you're protecting, Mom. Anna, she whispered, but the word was empty. Not a plea, not regret, just a reflex. I ended the call. My hand lingered around the phone for a long moment before I set it face down on the nightstand. I stared at it as if expecting it to ring again. It didn't. Gran brushed her thumb over my knuckles. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I shook my head, feeling more tired than upset. No. I think I needed to hear it. Really hear it. She nodded with an understanding that only comes from someone who has lived her own disappointments, her own quiet betrayals. Being let down by the people who should love you most always leaves a mark. But acknowledging it sometimes hurts more than the wound itself. The house around us felt different now, as if the walls themselves were shifting to make room for the truth finally spoken, aloud. Every shadow felt a little sharper. Every sound is more meaningful. I drew a breath that felt heavier than any before. The investigator would arrive soon. Legal consequences were unfolding in real time. My dad's lies were unraveling. Gran's survival was no longer a silent battle she fought alone. And now, the thin thread connecting me to my mother had snapped completely. Maybe it had never been a thread at all. Maybe I had imagined it because I wanted so badly to believe she cared enough to pull me in when everything else fell apart. I looked at Grandma again. Her eyes were soft but unwavering. You still have me, she said. I nodded, but my voice came out in a whisper. I know. I just didn't realize until tonight how much I was still hoping for her. Gran squeezed my hand again. Hope is not a weakness, Anna, but holding on to the wrong people can break you. I let those words settle deep in my chest. She was right, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one breaking. I lifted my head when I heard movement outside the room. A car pulling into the driveway. Heavy tires crunching frozen gravel. Not aggressive, not frantic. Purposeful. The investigator had arrived. I stood up, wiped my face with the back of my hand, even though I hadn't cried, and straightened my shoulders. This time, I wasn't walking into the unknown blindly. I was walking into the truth. I took one slow breath and stepped into the hallway just as the investigator's car door shut outside. The sound echoed through the house like something final, something irreversible. Grandma stayed still behind me, keeping her eyes closed to protect the timing of everything we had planned. I moved toward the front of the house, but before I reached the foyer, I heard the crunch of tires again, this time from the other direction. Another vehicle, another engine. Familiar voices. Dad and Mia had come home early. I froze halfway down the stairs as the front door swung open. Cold winter air burst inside along with their hurried footsteps. His voice hit first, sharp and low. Check your phone again. It has to be a mistake. Mia followed him in, her coat half off her shoulders, her brows drawn tight. It says account freeze, Dad. It is not a glitch if the bank calls 3 times. I stopped at the bottom step. They hadn't seen me yet. There was no trace of the cheerful, vacation mode attitude they had left with. They looked rattled, scared even. It was the first sign that their world was cracking in places they had worked too. Hard to hide. He noticed me then. He straightened instantly as if he could force authority back into his posture. There you are, Anna. Why are the lights still on in her room? He meant Grandma. I kept my voice even, because I was with her. He stared at me. Something calculating flickering in his eyes. Then he brushed past me and headed toward the hallway. Mia trailed behind him, muttering under her breath about timing, banks, people causing problems. My stomach tightened. Mr. Collins and the investigator would be at the door any minute, and yet here I was, watching my dad head straight toward Grandma's room like a man, trying to regain control before he lost everything. I followed them down the hallway. He pushed open Grandma's door without knocking. The room was dim except for the lamp beside her bed. She lay still, her breathing slow and deliberate. Every detail of her act planned and practiced. He walked right up to her and leaned down like a man inspecting a piece of property. He touched her wrist, checking her pulse. Then he lifted her eyelids one at a time. Mia stood at the foot of the bed, snapping her gum like she was bored. His voice dropped. Where is her medication? My heart thudded. What medication? He shot me a glare sharp enough to slice. The morphine. The one the hospice recommended. There is no hospice order, I said quietly. The lie felt dangerous, but necessary. He straightened, his nostrils flaring. "Anna, do not play stupid right now. You have a talent for making things worse. But not tonight." Mia smirked. Some things never change. The old familiar sting burned behind my ribs. Growing up, they had used that tone on me for everything from dropping a glass to asking too many questions. But tonight, I felt something else rising inside me. Something steadier. He moved closer, his voice dropping into the tone he used when he wanted control. "What exactly did you do while we were gone?" I swallowed. "I took care of her." He stepped in even closer. "Did you talk to anyone? Did you call anyone? You always made messes growing up. You never knew how to stay quiet when it mattered." Every word punched old bruises inside me. Every syllable carried years of dismissal and blame. Mia folded her arms and watched like this was entertainment. He leaned in so close I could smell the cold air trapped in his jacket. I expected him to lower his voice, but instead he let it rise with something unfiltered, something ugly. "I never planned my life around you. You were never supposed to matter." My breath caught. The world tilted. I had heard versions of that message my whole life, but never spoken out loud, never so clearly, never with such finality. It was not an accident this time. It was the truth he had been holding back, and now it was out in the open, hanging in the air like smoke. Before I could respond, the front doorbell rang. All three of us froze. Mia blinked. "Who the hell is that?" His jaw tightened. "Stay here." He pushed past me and strode down the hallway. I followed slowly, my legs shaky but my mind sharp. Mia trailed behind me, whispering to herself about bad timing. He opened the door halfway before stopping short. Mr. Collins stood there with his briefcase in hand, his expression calm but authoritative. Next to him was a man wearing a thick winter jacket and holding a leather folder. The investigator. "Good evening," the investigator said, flashing his badge just enough for him to see. "We received a request for an urgent welfare check and documentation review." His face changed. Not fear, exactly, but shock. A deep, rattled disbelief. "What is this? Who called you?" The investigator gestured toward me. "She did. As next of kin present in the home tonight, she has provided emergency consent." He turned on me so fast, Mia took a step back. "You did what?" I forced my voice not to shake. "I did what was necessary." Mr. Collins stepped inside. "If you would allow us to enter, we have documents that need immediate clarification." He blocked the doorway, gripping the frame with both hands. "This is my house. You do not just walk in here without..." The investigator held up the folder. "The pharmacy filed a mandatory report of irregularities. Your mother's care team flagged unanswered messages, and the accounts related to her treatment were frozen due to suspicious activity. That gives us authority to check on her well-being immediately." His face went red in patches. "There is no suspicious activity. This is all a misunderstanding." Mr. Collins looked him square in the eye. "Then you have nothing to worry about." That was the moment he realized he was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Not by force, but by facts, by truth, by timing he had not controlled for once in his life. He stepped back stiffly, allowing them inside. Mia whispered to me with a hint of panic, "What did you do?" I didn't answer. I walked behind the investigator as he moved toward Grandma's room. My dad followed closely behind him, trying to stay ahead of the story, trying to rebuild authority with every step. We all filed into the bedroom. Grand remained still, the perfect picture of quiet fragility. The investigator approached her with a soft, respectful tone, checking her pulse and eyes without disturbing her act. My dad crossed his arms. "She has been declining. She barely eats. She does not respond. That is why we were considering hospice." Mr. Collins set his briefcase on the dresser and opened it with a slow, deliberate click. He pulled out a stack of papers already clipped together. "Then perhaps you can explain these, Mr. Reed." My dad hesitated. His eyes flicked down to the papers, then to me. then back to the investigator. For a man who prided himself on always having the upper hand, this moment was the first time I saw genuine panic flash beneath his composure. The investigator shifted his weight, his expression neutral but firm. "We need to talk. All of you." The room filled with a heavy silence, thick as winter fog. My dad looked from the investigator to Mr. Collins, then to Grandma, then finally to me. The power he used to hold over every corner of this house was gone. I could almost feel it dissolving around us, falling away like broken pieces of something that had been held together too long by fear and habit. The investigator glanced at me. "Anna, would you be more comfortable speaking in another room?" I nodded. My voice came out quiet but steady. "Yes." My dad shot me a look full of fury and disbelief, as if I had betrayed him by choosing to protect a woman who had never once asked for anything except dignity and safety. Mia stood frozen near the doorway, her usual bravado hollowing out into uncertainty. I stepped aside so the investigator could guide us to the living room. My heart was pounding, but the heaviness that had lived in me since childhood was finally beginning to crack. Something had broken open tonight. Not just the truth, not just the lies, something inside me. And I was not afraid of what would come next. I followed the investigator into the living room, my pulse still tapping hard beneath my ribs. My dad and Mia came in behind us, trying to arrange their faces into something neutral, something controlled. But the tension spilling off them made the entire room feel smaller, like the walls were pulling tighter with every breath. The investigator gestured toward the round kitchen table that sat between the living room and the hallway. "We will speak here, one at a time. Please sit." My dad bristled. "There is no need for theatrics. We are cooperating." The investigator didn't flinch. "Good. Then this will proceed quickly." I sat in one of the chairs nearest the walkway, keeping the bedroom in view in case Grandma needed anything. My dad dropped into a chair opposite the investigator, arms crossed and jaw tight. Mia slouched beside him, tapping her nails against the tabletop. The sound grated against my nerves. Mr. Collins placed his briefcase on the counter and opened a folder with slow, steady movements. He had the calm of someone who had seen messier households, uglier truths, and more stubborn people than my dad, the calm of someone who knew exactly what he was about to do. The investigator clicked his pen. "Mr. Reed, let us start with you. When was the last time you witnessed your mother conscious or responsive?" My dad didn't miss a beat. "She has not responded in months. She is deteriorating." The hospice referral was appropriate. Mr. Collins quietly slid a paper forward. "Is this the referral email you sent?" My dad glanced at it, his confidence flickering for a moment before returning. "Yes, that is the recommended protocol." The investigator leaned forward. "Who examined her?" My dad blinked. "The physician from the clinic." "Name?" A beat, then another. My dad opened his mouth as if the name might fall out if he waited long enough for it to appear. "I don't remember at this moment." The investigator's pen paused over the paper. "You don't remember the doctor who evaluated your mother for end-of-life care?" My, Dad bristled. "It was months ago. We have been overwhelmed." Mr. Collins exchanged a quick look with the investigator before sliding another printout forward. "That email was never sent to the clinic. It was sent to yourself using a separate account with a slightly altered domain." Mia tensed beside him. His face drained a shade. The investigator continued. "We also have documentation that the pharmacy filed a report of irregular doses being picked up. Doses that do not match the prescriptions on file." His voice sharpened. "This is a misunderstanding. You are not hearing the full story." "We will," the investigator said calmly, "but I need you to answer the questions without interruption." He let out a short laugh with no humor in it. "Answer? My daughter, who has never taken responsibility for anything in her life, suddenly calls in an investigation and I have to justify myself? This is absurd." My throat tightened. He said it as easily as if the sentence had been waiting on his tongue for years. The investigator turned to Mia. "Miss Reed, did you participate in the decision to place your grandmother under home hospice?" Mia rolled her eyes. I mean, not technically. My dad handled everything. We thought this would be over by now. The room went silent. The investigator's pen stopped midair. Over by now? Mia realized her mistake instantly. She looked at Dad, panic rising behind her eyes. I meant the stress, the situation. But her voice trembled, and it was too late. David hissed her name, but the investigator was already writing. We will revisit that. Just then, the front door opened sharply. Mom hurried inside, her scarf half falling off her shoulders and her face pale. Anna? What is happening? Why are there police vehicles down the street? She turned and saw the investigator's badge. Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. Daw stood quickly. Linda, everything is fine. Sit down. She didn't move. Her eyes darted between him, the investigator, and me. What is going on? The investigator answered for him. We are responding to a mandated welfare report regarding your mother-in-law. There are concerns about falsified documentation and medical neglect. Mom's lips quivered. She shook her head. No, that can't be right. There must be some mistake. She looked at him desperately. Right? He didn't answer. His silence rang clearer than anything. The investigator continued. Miss Reed, were you aware of your husband initiating hospice requests? Her voice broke. I thought it was... I don't know. He said the doctor recommended it. He said she wasn't going to recover. Collins slid another document in front of her. Did you sign this? She stared at the paper, then at my dad. Harold, what is this? He snapped the folders shut. Enough. This interrogation is over. The investigator's tone hardened. Sit down, Mr. Reed. This is not optional. He froze, something shifting behind his eyes, a dangerous kind of stillness. A man calculating whether defiance or compliance would serve him better. He slowly sat. The investigator turned toward the hallway. Before we proceed, I need to see the patient myself. My heart pounded. This was the moment. The one Grandma had waited months for. The one she had measured every breath for. The one we could not afford to misstep. We walked back toward her room. The air felt thick, charged. My dad tried to follow, but the investigator held up his hand. Stay here. His jaw clenched so tightly, a vein popped near his temple. When the investigator stepped into the room, Grandma remained motionless. Her lashes lay soft against her cheeks. Her breathing is slow and even. She looked fragile enough to break under the weight of a fingertip. The investigator approached her gently. Mrs. Reed, my name is Officer Daniels. I'm here to check on your well-being. If you can hear me, can you give me any sign? Silence. My dad called down the hallway. She won't respond. She can't. Mia added from behind me. You're wasting your time. But Grandma's fingers twitched. Barely. A whisper of movement. So small, someone not looking for it might miss it. The investigator didn't miss it. He leaned closer. Mrs. Reed, can you open your eyes for me? And she did. Slowly, deliberately. Her eyelids lifted like someone rising out of deep water. Her gaze focused immediately. Clear, sharp, a mind fully present. The entire house seemed to inhale at once. His voice shot through the hallway. Mom gasped. Mia cursed under her breath. Grandma looked at the investigator, then at me, and the faintest smile curved her lips. The investigator's expression shifted from professional neutrality to unmistakable alertness. Miss Reed, have you been aware of what has been happening around you? She blinked once. Yes. That one word hit the room with the force of a hammer. Mom stumbled backward into the wall, covering her mouth with both hands. Mia swore again, louder this time. My dad muttered something under his breath, something furious and disbelieving. The investigator stood straight. Mr. Collins, are you recording? Already am, he said, lifting his phone. Good. Officer Daniels opened his folder. Based on this new information, I am initiating the following actions. Effective immediately, the accounts associated with Mrs. Reed's care will remain frozen. All medical directives are suspended until reviewed. and Mrs. Reed must be temporarily separated from any individuals under investigation, which currently includes her son and granddaughter. My dad exploded. This is insane. She is confused. She doesn't know what she's saying. Anna has manipulated her. She's always been trouble. The investigator turned toward him, voice calm, but edged with authority. If you raise your voice at me again, I will ask you to leave the property permanently. His face flushed red. His nostrils flared like he might burst into movement, but he didn't. Mom looked at me through wide, watery eyes. Anna, what did you do? I didn't answer, not because I didn't have words, but because this moment wasn't about me. It was about Grandma finally being seen, heard, believed. The investigator turned toward Grandma again. Miss Reed, is there anything you wish to say before we continue? She shifted slightly, her hand reaching out. I stepped closer and took it gently in mine. Then, in a clear, steady voice that carried through the entire house, she spoke. I know exactly what they tried to do to me. The room fell silent, so quiet you could hear the winter wind scraping against the windows. My dad looked like someone had punched the air out of him. Mia's face was drained of color. Mom sank into a kitchen chair, trembling. Gran squeezed my hand faintly. Her eyes stayed open, unwavering. And that was when everything in the house changed. Everything in our family changed. The truth had walked into the center of the room and refused to leave. And no one, not even my dad, could bury it again. The room felt thinner after Grandma spoke. Not quieter, because the house had already been full of silence, but thinner. As though the truth she released had peeled away a layer none of us could ever put back. My dad stood frozen near the foot of her bed. Mia looked like her body forgot how to hold itself upright. Mom clutched her scarf with shaking fingers as if she had been waiting for someone to tell her what to feel. Officer Daniels closed his folder slowly. Thank you, Mrs. Reed. That answers several questions. Grandma did not break eye contact. Her gaze never wavered from him, but she kept my hand held gently in hers. It made me look stronger than I felt. We moved back into the living room. Officer Daniels asked us all to sit. The house that used to feel like a prison felt different now, like walls were bending in new directions. My dad dropped heavily into his chair, his jaw stiff. Mia hovered behind him, arms crossed tight. Mom sat tiny and folded near the edge of the couch, her knees angled inward as if trying to disappear. A second car pulled into the driveway. Thick tires, slow approach, heavy tools in the back. When the door opened, a woman stepped out carrying a laptop bag and a stack of folders. She had a badge clipped to her belt and a thin braid tucked behind one ear. Evening, everyone. I am Forensic Analyst Harper. I have been assigned to review the financial documentation connected to this case. My dad shot up from his chair. Financial documentation? What financial documentation? That is none of your business. Officer Daniels motioned him to sit. Actually, it is, and you will remain seated during her review. My dad glared at him, but obeyed. I knew why. Defying a police officer would only make everything worse. Miss Harper placed her laptop on the kitchen table and connected it to the portable power pack she carried. Her fingers moved with quick familiarity. She pulled up spreadsheets, emails, account ledgers, bank statements. The screen lit her face in soft blue light. Let us start with the flagged transactions, she said calmly. My dad folded his arms across his chest. You cannot just access our accounts. Your accounts were frozen after multiple banks reported suspicious activity connected to an elderly patient. She replied without looking up. We have full legal authority. He flinched, but not in guilt. It was fear, the kind of fear you see in men who thought their secrets were safe. She turned her monitor slightly toward Officer Daniels. I am seeing transfers from Mrs. Reed's accounts into a private checking account held by Mr. Reed. The amounts increase gradually over 18 months, ending in larger amounts during the last 3 weeks. Mia shifted nervously. My dad turned his head sharply. Mia, get your phone. She blinked. What? Get your phone. Call the bank. There is a mistake. Miss Harper continued with steady calm. There is also a secondary pattern. Payments labeled repairs, licensing fees, and equipment rentals connected to your company. She looked directly at him. These charges do not align with any documented business expenses. His face reddened. That is my bookkeeping. I have every right to move money between accounts. I own the company. I own the house. I take care of everyone here. Ms. Harper clicked another window open. There are also late payments to multiple credit lenders and gambling platform, withdrawals from your company card. Mom gasped softly. Mia said nothing. He shoved away from the table so hard, the chair legs scraped loudly. You went through my private records. Officer Daniels stepped between him and the table. Sit down, Mr. Reed. He hesitated, then dropped back into the chair like gravity had suddenly doubled. Ms. Harper continued her review. The transactions match the timeline of forged medical documents, falsified hospice emails, and the pharmacy alerts. Combined, they strongly indicate financial elder exploitation under state law. His breathing grew heavy. This is insane. You do not understand my situation. I had to cover debts. I had to fix the company truck. I had to pay for Mia's program. Her future depended on it. Mia shot him a sharp look. Dad, do not drag me into this. But his desperation was unraveling fast. I did all of this for this family, for you, for your mom, for your college. Ms. Harper raised an eyebrow. Actually, Miss Reed, that brings me to the next part. Mia stiffened. What? I received an automated alert from your university as part of your aid verification. Because your dad is under investigation for elder exploitation, the school has placed your scholarship on hold, pending a full review. Mia's mouth fell open. What? No, they cannot do that. It is already done, Miss Harper said gently. You will receive an email shortly. Mia's phone chimed. She froze, staring at the screen as if it had betrayed her. My dad pointed a trembling finger at me. This is your fault. You always destroy everything. But the anger had nowhere to land. Not anymore. Ms. Harper clicked open the final document. Now, regarding Miss Reed's email correspondence, Mrs. Reed meaning the daughter-in-law, not the elder, Mom straightened suddenly, her hands gripping her sweater. I did not send anything wrong. I only replied to Harold. I did not know the forms were fake. I did not know he altered anything. She looked at me with pleading eyes. But for once, I felt nothing. No guilt, no need for comfort, no need to rescue the mother who never once rescued me. Harper placed a printed email thread in front of Mom. According to this chain, you were aware the clinic had not endorsed hospice. You acknowledged it was too early, and you still forwarded the approval to a provider, using language that implied urgency. Mom's face turned white. I did not think so. I just did what he told me. He said it was necessary. He said she had no chance. My dad slammed his fist onto the table. That is enough. Officer Daniels fixed him with an icy stare. If you strike anything again, you will be removed from this home. That quieted him. Ms. Harper went on. Ms. Reed, your actions may fall under the category of facilitation, though your cooperation will affect how the state proceeds. Mom buried her face in her hands. Her entire body shook, but no tears came. It was not grief. It was not even guilt. It was fear of consequences she had never expected to face. Mr. Collins stepped forward. As counsel for Mrs. Reed, the elder Mrs. Reed, I will now submit her sworn statement. Grandma, still sitting upright with help from pillow, began speaking slowly but clearly. Her voice had regained strength now that the truth was allowed to breathe. My son and granddaughter intended to place me in hospice so they could access my accounts. I pretended to sleep to avoid confrontation. I heard the conversations. I saw the paperwork. I watched them hide documents in the desk drawer. And I watched them mock Anna for being too simple to notice. Mom covered her mouth. Mia glanced away. My dad stared at the floor. Grandma continued. I saw the pills my son hid. I saw him pocket the mail before anyone else could read it, and I feared for my life. His head jerked up. That is a lie. Officer Daniels did not blink. Her statement is now part of the record. Ms. Harper closed her laptop. With these combined findings, I will file the preliminary financial charges within the hour. The state will review them for full prosecution. His chair scraped again as he stood. You cannot charge me without a full review. I want a lawyer. I want to see the documents. You cannot just barge in here and take my life apart. You already took it apart, Grandma said quietly. The room froze again. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of someone who had been denied dignity long enough. He shook his head violently. I was trying to help. I was doing what needed to be done. I built this family. I built this home. I paid every bill. And now some meddling child and a bunch of nosy investigators think they can accuse me? Officer Daniels opened his folder one more time. The state is moving forward with charges of financial elder exploitation, attempted fraud, and falsification of medical records. You will be required to surrender access to all accounts involving your mother. His body sagged like a man losing the strength to hold himself upright. His face took on a strange mixture of disbelief and rage. Mia looked terrified. Mom looked hollow. I stood to the side, silent, steady, not triumphant, not smiling, just a present. The investigator spoke again. Effective immediately, the state is filing the official charges. Mom let out a broken sound. Mia clutched her head. He stared at the wall like it had personally betrayed him. Grandma lifted her chin, her voice steady. She said the words that ended the night. It is time someone told the truth about what you have done. The air was still. Even the house seemed to stop breathing. And for the first time in my life, I watched their kingdom fall. The house felt different after Grandma's words settled into the air. Not lighter, not heavier, just changed in a way that made breathing feel strange for a moment. He sat stiffly at the kitchen table, his hands clasped so tightly the knuckles had turned pale. Mia paced near the entryway, checking her phone every few seconds, like she was waiting for someone to tell her this was all a bad dream. Mom sat motionless on the couch, shoulders hunched, staring at the floor as though she were afraid to lift her eyes. Officer Daniels stepped forward again. Based on the evidence gathered and the statements provided, an emergency protective order is being issued tonight. Mr. Reed, you will leave the property now. My dad's head snapped up. Leave? I am not going anywhere. This is my home. I built this place from scratch. I paid every bill. I kept this family alive. His voice trembled at the edges. Not with anger exactly, but disbelief. The disbelief of a man who had always managed to escape consequences, who had always assumed rules were suggestions and accountability was optional. Officer Daniels remained steady. This is not negotiable. You are prohibited from staying in the residence until the investigation is complete. My dad pushed back from the table abruptly, but instead of standing to fight, he grabbed the edge of the table with both hands, as if he needed it to hold himself steady. His breath hitched, his eyes filled with something I had never seen in him before. Tears. Not grief tears. No remorse. The kind of tears a cornered man uses when he needs to shift the ground on everyone's feet. He looked at Mom first. Linda, do you see what they are doing to us? To me? After everything I have done for this family, they are treating me like a criminal. He reached a trembling hand in her direction. You know I never meant any harm. Mom looked at him but did not get up. Her face looked drained, like someone had unplugged the electricity inside her. He turned to Mia next. Sweetheart, you know this is wrong. You know I did what I did so you could have a future, so you would not have to struggle the way I did. His voice broke. I did it for you. Mia lowered her phone slowly. Dad, I did not ask you to commit a crime for me. The words hit him like something physical. He flinched, shoulders tightening, and his eyes darted to me. Then he walked toward me with a strange softness, his hands now open at his sides, his tone shifting again. Anna. The way he said my name made the room tilt for a moment. Anna, you have always misunderstood me. You have always taken things the wrong way. I know I was not perfect, but I did my best. I only wanted this family to survive. You think exposing this will fix anything? It will destroy all of us. His voice grew quieter, more fragile. I am asking you, just once in your life, to think about the family, to think about your mother, about Mia, about the business, about everything that holds this house together. I stared at him and realized something painful and strangely clarifying. He did not see me. Not really. Not ever. To him, I had always been a tool, a buffer, a body to blame, a witness to manipulate, a child to silence. For a moment, I wondered what might have happened if I had heard these words years ago. Would I have folded? Would I have believed him? Would I have chased his approval, the way I chased sunlight as a kid? But I was not that girl anymore. I stepped back, and the small movement broke the spell he was trying to cast. Officer Daniels positioned himself slightly between us. Mr. Reed, you need to gather belongings and prepare to leave. My dad's face twisted. His voice cracked into something sharper. Anna, please, think. You do not have to do this. Grandma's voice moved through the hallway, softly but clearly. She said, yes, she does. My dad closed his eyes tightly, as if her voice physically hurt him. Officer Daniels repeated himself. Gather a change of clothes and essential items only. You will be escorted out. My dad swallowed hard, then nodded slowly. He turned toward the hallway, but not before leaning close to Mom and whispering something I could not hear. Her shoulders folded tighter. She looked away. Officer Daniels followed my dad down the hall, while Ms. Harper and Mr. Collins remained at the dining table to finalize paperwork. Mia stayed rooted to the floor near the front door, staring at a spot on the wall as though waiting for it to give her instructions. I moved toward Grandma's room, drawn by the soft rustle of blankets. She was sitting up a little higher now, repositioned by the nurse who had arrived quietly during the chaos. Her eyes were alert, calm, but there was a deep sadness inside them. She reached out her hand when she saw me. I walked in and took it, lowering myself onto the side of the bed. Her gaze moved toward the hallway where my dad had gone moments before. She let out a slow breath. I hoped he would turn into a better man before I left this world. I squeezed her hand gently. She looked back at me. But I need you to know this, Anna. None of this is your fault. Nothing about what is happening tonight belongs to you. They created this. They dug this hole, not you. Her words settled deep inside me, filling places that had been empty for years. Footsteps returned down the hallway. I stood and stepped to the door. Officer Daniels appeared first. Behind him, my dad carried a small duffel bag, shoulders slumped, face blotchy. He looked older than I had ever seen him. He stopped at the threshold of the living room, scanning the space like he was memorizing it. Then his eyes landed on me. The manipulation returned, soft and poisonous. Anna, do you really want your dad living out of a motel on New Year's Eve? Do you want strangers seeing him dragged out of his own home? Do you understand how cruel this is? His voice trembled with a practiced sadness. I held his gaze and said nothing. The silence was my answer. Mom stood slowly, her face streaked with quiet panic. She stepped toward him as though she intended to beg the officer to reconsider. But Grandma's voice floated from behind me again. Linda. Mom froze. Gran's tone was soft, but cut clean through the house. It was easier when you stayed quiet. Mom's mouth opened, then closed. Her shoulders dropped. Her whole body sagged inward like a balloon losing air. That one sentence stripped away the illusion she had been clinging to for years. I felt something shift inside my chest, a quiet understanding. Mom had never chosen me. She had only ever chosen whatever made life easiest for her. My dad's attention whipped back toward the officer. This is a mistake. All of this is blown out of proportion. The officer lifted a document. The charges being processed include financial elder exploitation, fraud, falsification of medical records, attempted medical neglect, and unauthorized access to controlled medications. Mom covered her mouth again. Mia took a step backward, her spine hitting the wall. My dad stared at the list, eyes wide. Officer Daniels nodded toward the door. It is time to leave. My dad let out a sound that was part laugh, part sob. He looked at me once more with a broken expression, as if expecting me to crumble. I didn't. He stepped toward me suddenly, but the officer placed a firm hand on his shoulder. That is close enough. My dad's voice came out low, jagged, meant only for me. You will regret this. I stood taller. For the first time in my life, his words did not land anywhere inside me. They fell to the floor like small, useless stones. Officer Daniels guided him toward the door. The knob turned. The cold night air spilled inside again. My dad glanced back one last time, eyes full of betrayal and fear and rage that no longer had a place to go. He stepped outside. The door shut behind him with a quiet click. Mia sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands, whispering something that sounded like it was not supposed to end like this. Mom slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, staring at nothing. I stayed exactly where I stood, breathing deeply. Grandma held out her hand again. I walked to her side and clasped it. She whispered, "You did nothing wrong." Those 4 words felt like a doorway opening, a weight falling away, a truth finally allowed to live. And as I stood there, shoulders straight, head lifted, I realized something simple and profound. This was the moment I stopped being afraid. It was also the moment I finally stepped into the person I was always meant to become. Outside, the cruiser engine hummed as my dad was escorted away. Inside, our house exhaled. For the first time, it felt like a place where something new could begin. The house stayed quiet long after the cruiser pulled away. Mom still sat on the living room floor, staring at the closed door like she expected my dad to walk back through it and undo everything. Mia paced in small, tight circles near the kitchen, muttering into her phone, probably trying to salvage what little of her future she thought she has still controlled. But for me, the silence was not frightening anymore. It was steady. It was honest. It felt like the first real breath the house had taken in years. I stepped back into Grandma's room. She was awake, eyes soft, breath even, her hand resting over the blanket. When she saw me, she lifted her fingertips just slightly, enough for me to take her hand and sit beside her. I felt the warmth of her skin and realized I had not felt warmth from a family member in a very long time. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" I nodded, not because everything was solved or simple or peaceful, but because, for the first time, the truth was not buried under fear. Gran closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. "I never wanted this for you. But I am glad you finally saw who they are and who you are not." I stayed beside her for a long while, listening to her breathing, feeling the quiet shift and settling. Eventually, the nurse asked to check her vitals again, and I stepped away to let her work. The next 48 hours moved like a slow unraveling. Officers arrived to collect additional statements. Ms. Harper returned twice to gather more financial documents. Mr. Collins guided Grandma through the process of giving her full written testimony. My dad stayed in a motel near the interstate, leaving angry voicemails for everyone except my dad. Mia received another email informing her that her scholarship review had escalated to a full investigation. Mom stayed in her room most of the time, leaving only for tea or to sit near the window in the kitchen, staring at the backyard like it held answers to questions she never learned to ask. The house felt strange in those days. Half broken, half healing, and then came the day Grandma was cleared to leave. The decision was not dramatic. A nurse adjusted her chart. Officer Daniels signed a clearance form. Mr. Collins made a few quiet calls, and then it was done. Gran did not want to stay in that house another minute. She told me so before anyone else could suggest another plan. "Anna, take me home. You're home." I blinked. My home was a small apartment with slanted ceilings and a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people to stand in. But when she said the word home, something in my chest tightened. I called my landlord that afternoon. He agreed to let me sublet the larger unit on the first floor. It was more money than I planned to spend, but I knew I would find a way to make it work. The next day, after a small team helped move her medical supplies, Gran and I packed her belongings. She refused to take anything my dad had purchased for her, only the quilt she made in her 20s, her jewelry box from her mother, and a few books. Mom stayed in the doorway as we packed. She kept twisting her hands together. "Anna, can we talk?" I did not stop folding the quilt. "About what?" She hesitated. "Everything that happened has been overwhelming. I am trying to understand. I am trying to make sense of what your dad did and what you did and why it all happened so fast. Her voice trembled, but not in a way that reached me anymore. Mom, the documents have dates. The emails have timestamps. The pharmacy made the report. None of this was sudden. She swallowed hard. I know. I just did not know what to do, Grant answered from across the room, her voice calm but firm. You always knew, Linda. You simply chose not to do anything. Mom looked at her with a grief that had no place to go. Then she looked at me. I am sorry for what I said on the phone. I am sorry for a lot of things. I nodded. I was not cold. I was not angry. I was not trying to make her feel worse. I had simply run out of room inside myself to carry apologies that changed nothing. I finished folding the quilt and placed it in the suitcase. Mom whispered, "Will you ever talk to me again?" I paused, choose my words with care. I do not know yet. She nodded slowly, and for once she did not push, did not guilt, did not beg. That was the closest she had come to real honesty in years. We left that afternoon. I turned off the lights, closed the curtains, locked the front door. I looked at the house for a long moment. Every memory inside it felt frayed at the edges. Every corner carried both laughter and pain. It was the place I grew up, but not the place I became myself. When I walked away, it felt like setting something down I had been carrying since childhood. Life did not magically fix itself once Grandma moved in with me. My apartment smelled like fresh paint and dust from the recent renovations. I bumped my hip into the same counter corner twice a day. The heating system rattled at night. But each morning when I made coffee, I heard Grandma humming in the next room, and it felt like a new kind of home. She loved the sunlight that came through the bedroom window. She kept her jewelry box on the small dresser. She insisted on folding laundry even when I told her I could handle it. The rhythm of our days was slow, simple, steady. I leaned on my friends more. People from work brought meals. My manager told me to take time off without asking for explanations. Neighbors knocked on the door with welcome notes and extra blankets. I felt surrounded by a softness I did not expect. 3 weeks after she moved in, Grandma called me into her room. She was sitting upright, her hair brushed, wearing the soft blue sweater she liked. "Anna, hand me my folder." I passed her the manila folder from her nightstand. She placed it in my hands. "I updated my will," she said gently. "Everything belongs to you now. It always should have." I stared at her, shocked. "Graham, you do not have to do that." She smiled. "Sweetheart, I am not giving you anything that was not already yours in my heart. I am simply putting it on paper." I felt something warm rise behind my eyes. I tried to swallow it down, but she patted my hand and said, "Let it out if it needs to. You held yourself together long enough." So I let myself lean into her shoulder, and she let me be small for a moment. The weeks that followed felt like learning to breathe all over again. Without my dad's voice shaping every room, without Mom's silence filling the air like dust, without Mia's sharp comments waiting at the end of every sentence. Every morning, I cooked breakfast for Grandma. Every evening, we watched the news together. Sometimes she told me stories about her 20s. Sometimes she fell asleep while I read on the couch. Sometimes we just existed in the same room without saying a word. It was peaceful. One afternoon, I drove past the old house on my way to pick up groceries. It sat dark and quiet, the blinds closed. A for sale sign had been hammered into the yard, leaning slightly to the left from the wind. I kept driving. When I got home, Grandma was sitting at the kitchen table drinking tea. She looked up and smiled at me in that warm, proud way she always had. "You look lighter." "Maybe I am," I said. She nodded. "Some families break you. Others set you free." I stood there for a moment, letting the truth of those words settle inside me. They fit perfectly, like a final puzzle piece clicking into place. Later that night, after Grandma had already gone to bed and the apartment was quiet, I sat on the couch with a blanket around my shoulders. The soft hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who apologized for taking up space, the one who believed she needed permission to be worthy. She felt far away now, like someone I used to know. I pulled out my laptop and opened the window just enough for the cool night air to slip inside. A new year sat waiting outside. Not loudly, not with fireworks, but with the soft promise of something different. And as I sat there, I realized I finally had a family. Not the one I was born into, the one I chose. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever been told you were too much or not enough for your own family, remember this: silence can be power, and truth can be the loudest revenge. Tell me in the comments what integrity means to you and where you are listening from.